Roger Ebert is here. For 35 years, his name has been synonymous with film criticism. He is the chief critic for the Chicago Sun-Times, and for the past 26 years, he has been the co-host of the successful television show, which is now called Ebert and Roper. He joins me now to take a look at this year in film and to talk about the holiday movie season. I'm pleased to have him whenever he's in New York. Welcome. This season so far, before we get... Is it disappointing? Is it surprising? Is it good, bad?
Charlie, this has been a great year for movies. I got an email from somebody complaining I was giving too many 4-star reviews, and they said I would only give 5 a year if it were me. And I'm thinking, I've given more than 20 4-star reviews already this year in the Sun-Times, and there were still some Christmas pictures I haven't seen yet.
Okay, in the Chicago Sun-Times.
That's the best. That's the highest.
4 is the
4
high.
stars. Yeah, it has been a good year for movies. And this season, right now, there are some movies opening. There's a movie open called Adaptation that is just blowing people away. I noticed A.O. Scott in the New York Times said he kept waking up in the middle of the night thinking about it. Lots of other good movies out there. After a couple of slow years, this has been a good year.
You haven't seen Catch Me If You Can?
No, I haven't.
Is there good early word about that, or you can't tell?
Well, I haven't heard any word about it at all. I don't know if anyone has seen it.
It's directed by Steven Spielberg.
Yes, Spielberg is a great director. Yeah. Minority Report, which came out last summer, sometimes we take Spielberg for granted because he's the most successful director in the history of movies, but Minority Report was a brilliant film. It was a brilliant visionary idea about this future, which could be kind of in our present, in which we don't have any privacy anymore.
Speaking of great directors, on this program was Martin Scorsese and Daniel Day-Lewis.
Martin Scorsese, the best living American director. My apologies to all the other directors, but a lot of them would agree with that.
You reviewed his first film, a student film, entered in some festival in Chicago. Now, were you writing for the Sun-Times?
Yeah, I was writing for the Sun-Times.
Were you the film critic?
I've been the film critic for 4 months.
All right. So you see this film, which is a student film out of NYU Film School?
Well, he made a third of it when he was an undergraduate, then he shot some more and made it into a feature. It was called Who's That Knocking at My Door?
Yeah.
It was the first film starring Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. I mean, it was the first movie I had ever heard use pop and rock music for the soundtrack. That later became very commonplace in movies like American Graffiti, and now it's a cliche, but he was the one who put the old 45s on to create the soundtrack of these guys in Little Italy, when they're hanging out in the club. And I wrote a review. I said that this guy, Martin Scorsese, is a brilliant director. He's going to be a great American director. In 10 years, he will be the American Fellini, I wrote. Now, that was not too brilliant because actually Scorsese and Fellini have very little in common as directors go, but it was meant as high praise. And
he loves Fellini.
Well, he loves it. Yes, of course he does. He made a 4-hour movie about the films of Italy. But Marty didn't even have the money to come to Chicago with his film. It was a black and white, like $20,000 film. But he called me on the phone because somebody read him the review. And he was thrilled. It was his first review. And then he says, this part where in 10 years I'm going to be the American Fellini. He says, geez, do you think it's going to take that long?
that's confidence, isn't it?
Well, I mean, within 10 years he had made Taxi Driver and Mean Streets, and
he was on his way to being our best director.
Made the best film of 3 decades in a row. Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas. Goodfellas
was the best movie of the 70s?
Of the 90s.
Of the 90s.
Yeah. You could argue that.
Yeah. What was the best movie of the 80s?
Raging Bull.
Raging Bull. Was it in the 80s?
Yeah, it was 1980 it came out. Yeah. Now you could also talk about movies like Apocalypse Now and Pulp Fiction, and you could mention other films that could contend, but Scorsese's in a class by himself.
What's the best movie that you have ever seen that was made, say, in the last 25 years, since you've been a film critic? Made since you... I'm trying to stay away from Casablanca.
Yeah, I know. And Citizen Kane. Yeah, everybody always says Citizen Kane. I think
Godfather could clearly be one.
It could be The Godfather. It could be Raging Bull.
Could be.
It could be Kieslowski's Red, White, and Blue trilogy. Those 3 films. It could be Pulp Fiction. It might be a documentary like Hoop Dreams, which is just devastating in the way it turns out. It's better than fiction. Could be Goodfellas. Yeah. Could be Apocalypse Now. Could be Fanny and Alexander. You know, Sight and Sound, the British film magazine, came out with this list of the 10 greatest films of all time, and the newest one on the list was Godfather 2. So then they had another poll, and they said, okay, we want to get some modern titles, so give us the greatest movies of the last 25 years. And the first 4 titles were Raging Bull, Apocalypse Now, Raging Bull, Fanny Alexander, and Goodfellas.
All right, let me ask about some Christmas movies. The Hours is getting a lot of conversation.
Yes, it is.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I have.
Do you like it?
Well, of course, I haven't reviewed it anywhere yet. But yes, I do like it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's going to get some nominations too.
Nicole
And
Kidman?
yes, it's a very intelligent adaptation of this novel that's based on Virginia Woolf, and then carries themes from her life into the lives of other women in a way that. Have you noticed in the last couple of years a lot of movies that kind of interact, various stories that kind of coil around and sneak up on each other? And it's that kind of a film. It's very intelligent, very well acted.
All right, we'll see. Nicole Kidman, Julianne Moore, and Meryl Streep.
Yes.
Okay, what a...
Yeah.
I mean...
And the funny thing is...
What a bundle of talent.
Nicole Kidman, of course, nominated last year. Meryl Streep and Julianne Moore might be nominated potentially for 2 movies this year, because Streep is also an adaptation and Julianne Moore is also in Far From Heaven. So how are they going to choose?
Wow.
And then there's another strange challenge that the Academy has with Charlie Kaufman, the screenwriter.
Right.
Because he wrote...
Adaptation.
And he also wrote Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Now, you know, is adaptation...
Let me just interrupt. Confessions of the Dangerous Mind is the story of Chuck Barris, who claims while creating all these game shows, he was also a CIA hired assassin.
33 hits for the CIA.
That's what he says,
yeah,
right.
He would go over with his dating game winners, and they would say, oh, you win a trip to West Berlin.
Yeah.
And then he would shoot someone while he was over there. The strange
Directed
thing,
by George Clooney.
Yeah. Now, that's an adaptation because it's allegedly based on Chuck Barris's book.
Yeah.
Then you have adaptation, but is that an adapted screenplay or an original screenplay, since it's an original screenplay about his failure to adapt the book Orchid Thief? Could he be nominated in both categories? I mean, is adaptation an adaptation or an original screenplay? I mean, I don't want to be on the Academy committee that tries to decide that.
It has the Academy's... It used to be said that the Academy was always in favor of its own, and was always in favor of established actors.
Yeah.
It was always had certain kinds
West
of prejudices,
Coast.
West Coast, and that New York actors and others and comedians normally were not nominated.
No Oscars for Martin Scorsese, no Oscars for Spike Lee, who has a Christmas movie coming out.
Yeah, go ahead.
The 25th Hour.
With Ed Norton?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
No.
What, The Pianist, have you seen that?
Yeah.
Roman Polanski's
Yes.
back. Is it good?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And it's in English. Which isn't... These days, a lot of European directors are making movies in English because it is becoming the international language.
I don't understand why. I don't understand why Polanski doesn't make his peace, and so he can come back to the United States.
Can he? I don't know what the legal ramifications are. I think if he comes back to this country, he might have to go to jail.
Well,
I'm not sure.
He's in trouble because he fled because he was being investigated for something.
For having relationships with a young woman.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Antoine Fisher is a Denzel Washington vehicle.
Okay, now I want to tell you that I cried at this movie. I saw it twice. I cried twice.
What's the story?
Well, it's about a young man who's a sailor, and he's a good sailor, but he has a short temper, and he's sent to he's sent to the Navy psychiatrist, played by Denzel Washington, and his name is Derek Luke. He's his first-time actor. And it's based on the true story of Antoine Fisher, who wrote the screenplay, and he was a security guard at Sony Pictures, and he showed the screenplay to people coming past his gate. You know, everybody in Hollywood has a screenplay, but he had a good one. Yeah. And you know, when I look at ads that quote critics in the paper, and you know, they're weeping or they're falling out of their chair with laughter, or you know, my life will never be the same, or it's the greatest movie of all time, I just shake my head because you know, that's too excessive. And so when I say that I cried at it, I don't hardly ever cry at the movies. And when I do cry, it's usually not because of something sad, it's because of something of goodness.
Yeah.
If somebody is good, and this young man, Antoine Fisher, is good, and his life has been all messed up. His father was killed 2 months before he was born. He was born in prison. His mother gave him up. He went to a foster home where he was mistreated and beaten and assaulted. And yet, he's a good man. Yeah. And so the psychiatrist says, you've got to go back to Ohio and seek out your family and make peace with that, or at least deal with that, or you'll never be able to get on with your life.
I haven't mentioned one great performance. I haven't seen the film, but everybody tells me it's a brilliant performance by Jack Nicholson about Schmidt.
Oh, yes, it is.
An Academy performance.
And yes. I mean, they've got too many performances
about
out there
Schmidt,
now. There are too many performances out there now. I mean, I don't see how they're going to limit it to 5 actors and 5 actresses. There's so many candidates that all seem to be naturals. Jack is another one. No ego here. He just plays an ordinary guy.
All right, let me just make sure, and we may miss something, but some of those that are going to be under consideration, brilliant performances. Jack in About Schmidt. Certainly Daniel Day-Lewis. Certainly Michael Caine. Certainly Michael Caine. What else comes to mind? We may miss something here, folks, but what may come to mind?
Derek Luke, if there's any fairness.
Derek
What
Luke.
a performance. He's the actor in Antoine Fisher. Then you have Nicolas Cage in Adaptation, playing twins.
A brilliant performance?
You can always tell the twins apart, even though he uses no tricks of makeup or hair. You know, he's Nicolas Cage as both twins.
Yeah.
Like one
But
guy doesn't have a beard or something.
Yeah. But you can tell him apart here by the way he...
I asked him about it. He said the posture. He says stands up straighter, you know, when he's the brother Donald. Charlie Kaufman's brother Donald. He stands up straighter. I don't know how he did it. There's never any doubt. Now, that's a great performance. And then I mentioned Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo. The problem there is, or for that matter, Hugh Grant in About a Boy, which came out way last spring. The Academy can't remember those films.
Right.
See, the Oscar season starts with the Toronto Film Festival, the weekend after Labor Day. And, you know,
But
basically...
there always are exceptions to that. Films that win
they
the
will
Academy...
go back. They will go back and occasionally, for example, Silence of the Lambs.
Exactly.
Opened
That's
in
the best
February.
example,
But
I
in
think.
general, one year, all 5 Best Picture nominees came out in December.
All right, I got to get some more in here real quick.
Okay.
Personal Velocity, which won at Sundance by Rebecca Miller.
Yes,
3
Arthur Miller's
separate
daughter,
stories, and nicely told stories with narration.
Perusa Balk and was the star of the third, which I thought was the best of the 3. I loved all 3 of them.
I did too. I like the second one better for whatever reason. But
Okay, well, and then there was 13 Conversations About One Thing by Jill Sprechter and written by her and her sister Karen, which is about happiness. Has people in it like John Turturro and Alan Arkin, and it's about. You ever notice how some people just seem to be lucky and other people seem to be unlucky, and it doesn't matter what you do, and you think you can plan, but no matter how much you plan, it doesn't work out that way. And it's a circular story. The characters kind of loop around and connect with each other, and that's a wonderful picture. Then there's The Man from Elysian Fields, which didn't do much at the box office.
Mick Jagger plays.
Mick Jagger is fabulous as the head of an escort agency.
Yeah.
They send, Andy Garcia comes in and says, "What do you do?" And Jagger says, "Well, we bring happiness into the lives of lonely widows." And he says, "Only women?" And Jagger says, "Call me old-fashioned." And that was James Coburn's last picture.
Bowling for Columbine was Michael Moore's documentary.
Do you think it'll be nominated? You know, they have a record with the Academy of never nominating any documentary that anybody ever went to see or that was ever successful at the box office. Roger and Me wasn't nominated. Hoop Dreams wasn't nominated. Brothers Keeper, Paradise Lost, Crumb. The best documentaries of the last 10 years have not been nominated.
And why is that?
I don't know. Maybe they want to help pictures that didn't get theatrical release. But Bowling for Columbine has been a hit all over the world, and it deserves to be nominated.
I got to mention Chicago.
I've seen that.
Have you liked it?
Yeah, I did like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Renee
Zellweger.
She's good.
Yes, she is.
Brilliant.
Yeah, as Roxy Hart.
Yeah.
They didn't pick. Catherine Zeta-Jones is in it, and she's the other lead. And she's a little more glamorous than Renee Zellweger, but they were right, of course, because Roxy Hart isn't the glamorous one. She's the kind of tough one who becomes the heroine because she's got that gumption. And then there's great dancing, great songs, and then they've added a little more dialogue than you saw on the stage.
What's going to be the biggest money winner this year, you think, in the end? Will it be some of these Christmas releases with,
it'll be either Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. Just like last year, Harry Potter was #1 and Lord of the Rings was #2, and they both did, like, in the stratosphere.
And that could happen again next year, too.
Well, I
don't know if they'll have a Harry Potter. I know they'll have Lord of the Rings.
There'll be a Harry Potter next year, too.
Yeah,
See,
so
we get the franchises now.
Yeah, right. Now, there was also Spider-Man, which made a huge amount of money. Will it be recognized at the Academy?
Well, it might get a nomination for special effects, but the special effects field is so competitive this year.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the special effects in Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, those pictures are like wall-to-wall special effects, and so was Spider-Man.
What book or what anything has influenced the way you watch movies?
I read Pauline Kael, of course. She's the great leader of all of us film critics.
And what did she teach you?
Well, she taught me something that Robert Warshaw, another great critic, put in a very succinct way. He said, a man goes to the movies and the critic must be honest enough to admit that he is that man. Now, of course, he could also be a woman. I mean, it's a sexist comment, but nevertheless, you're the person in that seat. It's your reaction. It's your opinion, and you have to say, for example, I went to see Antoine Fisher, and I cried, and I told you that I cried, but oddly enough, I'm reluctant to tell you that I cried because it makes me look like a sap. You know, because critics are always crying, and I want to be the critic who's too tough to cry. But if I did cry during that movie, then I have to tell you that that happened. I have to say, if I was aroused by an erotic scene, I have to tell you that happened. If I laughed, I have to tell you it was funny. I went to see Jackass, a shameful movie. I laughed all the way through it. I mean, I have to tell you that. I'm the guy. I was in the theater, and I have to be honest. I can't try to tailor my opinion to make it respectable or fashionable.
Is there one reviewer who you always want to read what he or she thinks of a movie?
Stanley Kaufman in the New Republic. Stanley Kaufman is the only critic now writing where when he disagrees with me, I figure maybe I was wrong.
Really?
Stanley Kaufman, he's about 82 years old now.
Yeah.
He writes every week in the New Republic. He is unfailingly perceptive and intelligent.
Movies are our art form, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're the art form of this century, and they're the art form of this country.
And it's one of our biggest exports.
And by this century, I meant the last century.
Yeah, and one of our biggest.
Oh yeah, we bring in billions of dollars from overseas, and we sell our image of our society overseas through our movies, for better and worse.
Roger, think of the people who died this year in the movie business: Billy Wilder, Richard Harris, Ted Demme, John Frankenheimer, Milton Berle, Charles Guggenheim, a documentary filmmaker, Dudley Moore, Bruce Paltrow, Rod Steiger, Robert Ulrich. I'm sure I'm missing one. Extraordinary people made a contribution to a business that you and I love.
Billy Wilder, I mean, I've got 5 of his movies in that book. I mean, out of 100 movies.
Which, of all the ones he made, which is your favorite?
It'd probably be Some Like It Hot,
Yeah.
but then might be Sunset Boulevard, could be Double Indemnity, might be The Apartment.
Yeah.
Here's a great director.
Yeah. Thank you, Roger. Great to have you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.